Hey everyone, I am Annibale Siconolfi. I'm a 3D artist and architect from Italy, and today I will show you how to create a basic futuristic city using Cinema 4D and Octane Render. Here is a block consisting of simple building models that I created earlier. I placed these low poly models on a regular grid. And now let's create a base for our model using a plane. It must be large enough to contain everything. Then we can copy our block in order to obtain a larger model. And now let's create a camera. I will set it on a parallel projection in order to have an isometric view. As we can see, we already have a good base to work on. There are many details, so we can finally start creating the first material for our buildings. Let's start by inserting an image texture in the node editor. I will choose one of my sci-fi textures. Let's change the material type in universal. We can use a roughness value of 0.3. And now we can apply the newly created material to the entire block of buildings. Let's insert the new material. Then we can set the UV projection on cubic. In this way, we will have a more homogeneous distribution of the texture on the buildings. As we can see, our texture is a bit dark. So let's insert a color correction between the image texture and our material and increase the brightness value. Okay, now we can create a new material for our base in order to add details below the buildings. Once again, I insert an image texture and I choose a sci-fi texture. We can use a displacement map in order to have more details. As a displacement map, I'm going to use a simple texture with nice details. Let's increase the resolution. As we can see, we have added many details to the base. We can decrease the height slightly. We can see it better by looking at the clay render. Now we are going to create the light elements for our buildings. We will use a texture with a black background. In this way, the texture emission will not calculate the black parts and will only use the light ones. As you can see, this texture has a black background. Now we can play with UV transformation parameters, and we can reduce the scale of our light texture. And now we can create a daylight object and experiment with different settings. We can already see this nice contrast that is created between the shadows of the elements and the lights that we have added on the buildings. And now I will create a new material which I will use to add details to the base. This will be a light material, and we will need it to create the lights at the base of the buildings. So let's insert our light texture and let's link it to opacity. We can desaturate the image through a color correction, and then we will link the same texture to emission. And this is the result. Let's copy our plan and apply the texture we just created to it. Now let's bring our plane up a bit because we have the displacement map covering it. Let's go to texture emission and activate the surface brightness, after which we reduce the value of power. We can see these light details on the render view, and we have a more complex image. And now we can create more variation in the composition by reducing the scale of some modules. We can also delete single objects that seem repetitive. And we can also increase the proportions of some buildings to create an even more varied composition. And now let's create a fog effect using Octane's fog volume. And let's increase the voxel size so as not to have a performance problem. Now let's play with the volume medium parameters. Let's make the absorption map brighter. And decrease the density. We can play with the height of the falling log. Let's set some daylight values. We can soften the shadows by increasing the sun size value, and let's play with the north offset. We can increase the angle of the sun to get a different illumination. And now let's add more details to the base by duplicating our plan. Let's increase the height a little and rotate it. As we can see now, we have much more detail at the base. We can play with the light settings again to increase the contrast of the shadows. We can increase the exposure through the camera imager. We can also apply a filter. We can continue to play with the daylight parameters. We can change the color of the sunlight so that you have different types of lighting. Okay, that's all. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. See you next time.